All right, Whitney, welcome to Living Off Rentals.
Happy to be here, Kirby. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you here. I really appreciate it. I know you're a fellow military veteran and former police officer, and now you're a full-time real estate investor who's had a ton of success, especially over the last several years. And for those who are listening, Whitney runs LifeBridge Capital, and he also has a really great podcast called the Real Estate Syndication Show. So I know you're a wealth of knowledge, so I'm excited to dive in. So if we could just start off from the beginning, and if you can kind of share a little bit about how this all started for you, because I think maybe this isn't the typical path that people think of when they think of a successful real estate investor.
It's probably a very different path. Some people joke and say, no, this is the way everybody does it, but very different. And Kirby, I go back to March of 2001, and because there's some things that happened there that I think have helped me to become a successful entrepreneur, or what some people call successful anyway, but
It's all relative, right?
yeah, that's right. That's right. And so in March though of 2001, I decided to join the military, and that was a big decision for me. Obviously, one of the biggest decisions in my life up to that point. And that was, it was 6 months, obviously, before our nation was attacked and we went to war.
Wow.
So I had no idea that, shortly after I would be spending a year of my life, in Iraq, and I had no idea, at that time. But I'm so thankful that I was able to serve. I'm so thankful that I did sign up. It was definitely a learning, a pivoting point, right? In my life, I learned so much, but I did shortly after.
How old were you?
I was 17 when I joined.
Wow.
I went overseas when I was, I think when we got activated, I was 20, I think.
Okay.
So it was like a couple years, in there before we actually went. So, I'm so thankful that I did it, right? I never imagined, obviously being put in those situations. However, learned a lot. Spent a year over there. Unfortunately, not everyone in my squad made it home, and so obviously, that shapes a young man in many ways through many things that life brings. It, Lord, things that the Lord brought in my path. While over there. However, that time in the military was just crucial in teaching me lots of things. So, one thing I love to point out is the military helped give me that never give up mentality. Right? It's just not an option to give up when you're in combat. I mean, people are depending on you to perform. You get knocked down. It's just not an option not to get back up, right? And you can't focus on the little difficulties or the little things that hinder a lot of people, right, from continuing, whether it's in business or in life or whatever it may be, right? It really helps put things in perspective in a big way. But it did. It helped me to just really develop a never give up mentality and just attitude of, hey, I can figure this out. I can do it. I can get back up. Knowing you're going to be knocked down helps you to deal with it, right, when it happens. It's going to happen, right? And the most successful entrepreneurs, hey, to the outside, people think that, hey, this was easy for them. Look, overnight success. But no, you didn't see them get knocked down so many times and make the decision to get back up, right? It doesn't matter what kind of real estate business you're in or business in general. Those people had been knocked down, and they were the ones that decided to continue to get back up. So I came home, and I really felt helpless at this time too, Kirby. I kind of believed that, hey, I had to have that piece of paper that said diploma at the top to really go anywhere and make anything of myself. And so I learned quickly that hey, that was not the case, but or I wouldn't say too quickly, but I came home, and law enforcement was really a great transition for me. It was something, hey, I'm qualified to do this. I would love serving. I love wearing the uniform. I love being a first responder. I enjoyed that. I would have done it for free the first couple of years. However, I got married about a year in, and my wife and I just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage. And so it quickly hit me that, hey, this is just not what is best, right? For our family, our hope to be family, at that time we were newly married, and I thought, okay, I've got to figure out some other way, because we wanted my wife to be able to stay at home. We had children, and Lord willing, and it was going to be difficult on, say, 25, 30,000 a year, and working the worst schedule, all the overtime possible. So I started doing some research, and this was 2008. I didn't know about the crash. I didn't make enough money for it to matter, at that time. Yeah. I didn't realize any of that stuff was happening hardly. But I started researching and learned that, hey, not only had one or two people built wealth in real estate, but millions of people had, right? And not in many or in majority of the people who have built wealth in their life had done it through real estate. And so I thought, okay, you know what? If that many people can do it, I can do something. Like I may not be this wealthy, commercial real estate investor, whatever, I may never be able to buy an apartment building, but hey, I can at least have a few rentals and support my family, have some other income, thinking that I would always probably be a police officer because I felt so stuck, right? I felt like I was almost helpless, thinking that's just what I'm going to do. But eventually so during that time, I thought, okay, we're going to do this. I bought 2 triplexes, a long story there, but made a bunch of mistakes. And my wife and I had bought a house, our first little house. We were remodeling it while living in it, which I wouldn't recommend for everyone. My wife had to wash dishes in the bathtub a lot longer than I would like to admit. But we did it. We learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes with these apartments, paid too much, trusted the seller too much, the realtor too much, didn't do deep enough due diligence, all those things, just very green. And that obviously I can see now, but we learned, it was just a great learning experience. Dealing with those tenants, all those things. Soon I learned about a federal agent position and figured out that, hey, I was qualified for that. I became a federal agent. That moved us to Virginia, where we live now. And at that time, we decided to sell those triplexes, and we did. It was a long process, but finally sold those. Kept pursuing real estate. However, I actually had a passion of training horses and became a professional horse trainer at the same time. And so I was pursuing some rentals on the side and going to some real estate meetups, all those things, trying to learn, really expecting though, maybe we'll be able to buy a duplex and maybe another single family home and, and just grow a small portfolio of rentals. That was really my thought process. Wasn't even sure we weren't making enough money to really have that many down payments. So I wasn't even sure how we were going to do that, but I was trying to learn and meet people and figure that out. And so I eventually though, my wife and I, we were walking on the beach one fall, and at this point I developed a horse training business, and I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined, doing lessons and clinics all over the country, and really grew a brand around that. It was a passion of mine. I loved doing it, and it came pretty easy to me. And I say that to say, you may be listening to this and you may be pursuing something that you're passionate about. Maybe you can make a business around it, but then again, maybe it's something that's kind of holding you back for a bit as well. It may not be the highest and best use of your time at this time. And so when we were on the beach, my wife and I were walking and we were just praying and thinking about, hey, is what we're doing right now going to get us where we want to be, say 3 years from now or 5 years from now? And that was just a pivotal moment for us, because it was like the light bulb went off, right? We just knew that, hey, it's not worth it. Even if it will, I was having to work too many hours. I was missing all that time with my wife and our 2 boys, then it just wasn't even worth it. And so I was like, okay, we have to make some massive decisions here to break out of this mold, right? And so we came home, and this was like September. Between Christmas and New Year's, we had sold our farm and our house and everything related to the horse training business. And the Lord just gave us both peace about that. How it did not, it was still very difficult though. I'll never forget my wife and I pulling out of the driveway the last time and just crying, Yeah. It was so difficult for us. However, we were starting our 3rd adoption process at the same time as well. And massive expense, 40 to 60 grand expected, to make that happen. I just hired a mentor in the commercial real estate space. It's another story, but so there's a lot of expenses, and we were not sure how we were going to make that happen. We knew selling the farm was going to help us with some of that, but it was also going to help me to commit at a whole new level, right? I knew that, hey, if we stayed on the farm, there's going to be people want me to train their horses. I'm probably going to say yes. I'm going to be distracted and, all those things. And so we said, you know what? For our family, long-term, we have to make this decision. And we were called crazy by everyone. I probably had one of the best JOBs that anybody in my family had ever had. They seen this as better benefits and the income and all these things, man, Whitney, it's so secure, right? Those words, right? It's so secure.
Yeah.
You have that income and health insurance and all those things that, hey, most of them, a lot of people would love to have. It's so true. However, we knew we could do more. And We sold the farm. We moved into a small house in town. At this time too, I started going to conferences as hard as I could go. And I started meeting people, Kirby, who, you know, they had only been in the business a year or two and they were buying apartment buildings. And I just thought, well, wait a minute, like I used to look at apartment buildings and think, I don't know who those guys are, but maybe 30 years from now, I'll be able to do something like that. Maybe, I just couldn't even imagine it. But again, at this moment, I thought, okay, you know what? If all these people can do this, I can do it too, right? I can do this. And so we jumped in with both feet, sold the farm, sold everything related to that business. And I built an office. We bought a small house in town, put 2 walls up in the corner of the basement in this old house. And that's where I practically lived for the next 2 to 3 years. And literally to the point that my wife would pack me lunch to go to the basement to work. I started the daily podcast and I would do 12 to 15 interviews in one day, a couple days a month. Wow. And I would still do interviews, after work during the week. But it was just a massive time of commitment for us. And to the point, my kids wouldn't almost see me till Sunday. I'm not proud of that, but they wouldn't almost see me until Sundays most weeks. And I would even be in the house. So it was just a time of, growing the business, networking as hard as I could go. The time that was so important during that time of our marriage and life too was early in the mornings. It was a time Chelsea and I could connect and just talk about where we're going. There were even times where it cost a lot of money to produce a podcast, especially 30 days a month. I would have to share with her, like, Chelsea, I don't even know if we can afford to do this next month. I don't know where this money's going to come from because it was very expensive, to do it. And traveling, as I was going to 2 or 3 conferences a month as well. And you know what, but the Lord would provide here. And it happened. We kept going eventually until, I partnered on a couple of projects and then met a business partner. We had complementary skill sets and we were just able to really take off from there in a big way. But the Lord's blessed our business, our big mission, our big why behind all that is another reason, another way that we kept going. It's branded us in a different way. It's helped me to have more meaningful conversations with investors that I did not see coming. I didn't plan it that way. It also is a way that, my wife couldn't care less about real estate. But when we were so, in the thick of it during the hardest times of keeping all that going, you know what? She's 110% behind our mission. She's 110% behind what we're doing and helping. We help families adopt children. And so that's our foundation. Nice. Does that. Right. And so that is, we have 3 children through adoption and happy to share some about that. But that is, it gave us a desire to help families with a financial burden of adoption. 150 million plus orphans in the world and costs 40 to 60 grand to bring one home. It's a shame, but it's not the child's fault, right? It's not the family's fault either. And we want to make sure we do it legally. But oftentimes couples will ask us questions about adoption. They say, Whitney, that's more than I make in a year. How can we even consider it, right? And so that's where we can partner with them and say, hey, if you'll commit to this, we're going to help you make it happen and in a big way. And so that's the way the LifeBridge Capital, my wife and I, give back, of course. But I'll tell you something else that happened, Kirby, that I want your listeners to think about as they are pursuing business, right? Having that way of giving back, it kept my wife and I going during some of the most stressful times, right? It helped her to get behind the mission. And I started to see that. But what I also started to see was at conferences, when you're talking to 200 investors, or maybe even at a meetup when there's 25 people there, if everybody's talking about real estate or the next deal or how much the returns or the market or whatever, like everybody starts to blend together, right? It's hard to remember who is who. However, when you come in and you start with your why, I didn't know of Simon Sinek at this time in his book, Start With Why, but that's what I was doing. It didn't even know it. It changes the whole conversation, right? And that person then remembers you for something different than they had a conversation with everybody else there, right? And even then, when I follow up a week later or 2 weeks later, unfortunately, if it took that long, they still remember who I was, right? And there's a different connection that's made. They see something you're passionate about. They see something bigger than just a financial gain. But what I've also at this point seen happen as our team has grown, I see that happening in our employees. Like they love knowing that they're a part of something bigger than just making a paycheck, right? They love that. When I can share that, hey, we partnered with another family or another child's been brought home because of the work we're doing here, but also our investors. They love knowing that they're a part of something bigger than just a financial gain. They want to make sure all that's good. Of course, all those normal things and due diligence and operate. However, they love knowing that they're a part of something that's giving back. So I'll have to say that's our big mission, right, behind LifeBridge Capital. But that it's had such a bigger ramification than I ever expected. And so, yeah, now, like you said, over 300 million in assets under management in a relatively short amount of time. Lord's opened many doors to make that happen and sustained us as well.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that incredible story. I feel like I don't need to ask any more questions. We could probably just end the podcast here. I didn't do anything. That's amazing. So many themes kind of emerge in that I can relate to myself. I think we share, there's some parallel paths that we shared. We both joined the military right around the same time. And I can vividly recall, I got out in 2011, but I can vividly recall when I was in the military, having that same feeling that you alluded to when you were, serving as a police officer, that trapped feeling, of like, I'm going to make this same pay, be in the same job, doing the same thing, and I really have very little autonomy or control over my destiny in this position, even though, I felt a sense of service, obviously, but I knew that I wanted to have my own thing. And then another thing that you brought up in there that kind of stood out to me was identifying that 3 to 5 year vision, in the future. You mentioned that your wife, you guys were on the beach and talking about, this horse business doesn't support where we want to go, is something you're passionate about. And so figuring that out led to massive shifts in your life. And had you not thought about, the outcome down the road or what your ideal life you wanted to look like, you wouldn't have made that shit. You'd probably still have that horse training business and be doing that. Not that, there's anything wrong with that, but it wasn't leading to the life that you had envisioned. So I think that's super important. So it kind of brings up a couple questions for me that I think others might have as well. And there's a lot of questions I was thinking of as you're talking, but to start off with, I think there's a lot of conflicting information out there for people who are getting started in real estate investing. And a lot of people are trying to figure out, what direction do I go? Because everything seems great. So some people say start with single family homes to get your feet wet, or they say start with mobile homes because they're super affordable, or start with wholesaling because you don't have to have any money. You can just, start doing it, or start with vacation rentals or multifamily. In your opinion, you started you said there was a lot of lessons learned on those early properties with single family. Is that where you recommend other people start, or what's after all your experience now, where do you recommend somebody get started?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And one I get often, and, I can remember very well when I started talking about commercial real estate and saying, hey, I want to learn the syndication business and buying apartment buildings. Like I was still going to that local meetup, and I had gotten to know a lot of these people pretty well. They knew who I was. I'd not really done anything at that point, and bought a couple, triplexes, and I had partnered on a 15 unit as well. And really, that was even a massive stretch for me, thinking that, hey, we own a 15 unit building. Like I just couldn't even believe it, at that time. Or we were helping manage, we were partners on it. But either way, I just couldn't believe it. And then I learned about the syndication business, and when my eyes were open to that, I started talking about that at the meetup, right, to other people. And one guy that I knew he cared about me, and he was kind of a mentor. He was a very successful entrepreneur in town and had many rentals, many single family in different properties in town. He came to me and he said, Whitney, well, most people will start, with like a single family home, and then maybe get a duplex and a fourplex. And then, you'll grow from there typically, something like that. And he was coming to me caring, right, for my well-being. He was, but I just was driven much more than that. I was, I had already met so many people who were doing it. I'm like, no, I can do this too. And so do you have to start with single family, or some type of small multis or whatever? I would say absolutely not. You do not have to start there. And I think that is such a limiting belief. Is that a great way to get started? Of course. Like the biggest thing is that you get started, right? Like get started. Like taking that first step or two is the hardest, right? Taking that little bit of risk in the very beginning, that's the hardest part. You're going to learn so much. Like I said, even from those 2 triplexes or the 15 unit, you learned a lot through partnership there. I learned a lot, just so many other people that I met through that process that I started learning from that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have taken that step. No different with the podcast or any of these things. Hey, I had to be willing to be uncomfortable. Right. I had to be willing to move forward, even, in times I didn't really know what I was doing, or, I had to know that, hey, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to find people that can help me. I'm going to whatever, I'm going to make it happen. And so it doesn't have to be single family. It doesn't have to be anything small. You can start in the commercial real estate business. But what I would say is oftentimes, especially in our business, like I couldn't do this by myself. We've built a great team, right? I mean, the Lord just keeps providing amazing people, and we're hiring in a massive way right now still. And so I couldn't do it without them, right? Everybody has a unique ability, unique specialty. And so if you're going to get started in this business, I usually say, hey, figure out that part of the business that you are passionate about. Is it underwriting? Is it spreadsheets? Well, great. Hey, go be the best at that thing that you possibly can be, right? You're not going to do every part of this business yourself. Very few people syndicate a deal by themselves, right? They're going to have some kind of wealthy network already or background or be able to fund it themselves or, something to be able to make that happen. That is not typical. However, somebody that can be really good at something, you're going to find other team members then that fill those other voids, right? And that's what I did. Underwriting is not a passion of mine. Can I do it? Yes, but it's not a passion of mine, right? And so when I found my business partner and he loves, like, I think he just dreams about numbers at night, and structuring deals. He is so talented at it. So when we were able to partner, we were able to move very fast. Right? We'd both been working in different fields, different parts of the business. So when we joined, our first project was $30 million, which is not common, right? But we had both been pushing really hard in different lanes, right? Towards the same goal almost. And so that was just a great partnership, right? We had skill sets that the other did not. So you don't have to start small. However, hey, that works as well, right? You have to think about your goals, think about where you're going to go, think about the level of commitment it's going to take, right? Make sure your spouse, your kids are on board with that as well. It's so important that you have that support when you're getting started. And so, hey, when you do get knocked down, you have people there to encourage you and say, hey, you can do this, you can keep going.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's really just a decision. So $30 million to start, I think that's the highest dollar figure I've heard of anyone to jump into it. So can you kind of explain the progression of LifeBridge Capital and how, so you partnered with someone, you started with a $30 million property. What did that look like? And then how did that progress from there?
Yeah, no, great question. So that project was even a test run. I met my business. I'd been asked, let me say this. I'd been asked by many people to partner. I'd been making a name for myself, putting a brand out there for a good while, the daily podcast going for a while before anything really happened for me. And you have to be willing to do that, right? And so many people asked to partner, but you have to remember, had invested so much time and money at this point, all these investor calls, hundreds and hundreds of investor calls, all this time and building these relationships. The last thing I wanted to do is go waste it on the wrong partnership, right? It was so important that was right. And so I said, no, to so many people. And then I partnered with a mentor of mine on a couple projects. And then I met Sam. Sam Russ is my business partner. We met at an event. And it was obvious he had complementary skill sets, that we agreed on faith and family, these things that I feel like are crucially important before the business even comes into the equation. And so I could see that, hey, he has skill sets that I don't have. I have skill sets that he doesn't have. We agree on some major things here. Maybe this is it, right? My wife and I have been praying for a business partner. And so I pulled him aside last night at the conference and really was just very open. Said, Sam, you seem to check all these boxes, what we've been praying for. I'd love to get to know you better. It doesn't mean we're going to partner, but I would like to get to know you if you're open to that. And so he ended up taking me by his house on the way home, meet his wife, and took me to the airport. And that was just the beginning of a great relationship. I mean, I went back to his house and stayed 4 days with he and his family just to get to know him. and get to see him interact with his wife and kids. That will tell you a
Wow.
lot about a future business partner, right?
Yeah.
But then numerous Zoom calls with he and his wife and me and my wife, and just to ask, hey, any questions that you need to know before we enter this marriage ultimately, right? I mean, we called it like, this is like a marriage, and we're in this. And so we want to ensure that, hey, whatever you need to know, you need to ask it now. Like, we want to make sure we're very open about this. But we moved forward. We did the first deal as almost a test run, and it worked out very well. And then, we've slowly grown. I say slowly. I mean, some people would say it's very fast. I mean, that we've done numerous $30 million projects and bigger now. We just did a large fund. But that came from the continuing, hey, the capital raise process, right? Meeting all these investors, the podcast, me traveling, speaking at events, all these things that started to happen. So more people know about us, more people know about our mission, and just apartment investing, all those things, and partnering with us. And then, Sam over here finding great deals, right? I mean, he's got those broker relationships. He is networking and finding those, and then moving. I mean, as fast as we can. We started hiring people, and so then I start to have more and more support, right? I mean, we both hired full-time assistants. We have investor relations people. We just hired a full-time asset manager. We're fixing to hire a acquisitions director, full-time, and even more investor relations people. We have 10 full-time people in the Philippines as well.
Wow.
And so all of those things were all learning experiences for me, right? Each of those things were a stretch for me, a little stretch here and a little stretch there, and sometimes big stretches, that helped me to learn. But you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And what I've learned is to even look for it. Like, when I feel something that makes me a little uncomfortable, that I know is a positive thing, of course, like, I just want to commit to it quickly. Because that real estate meetup years ago now, I remember them asking me, and I'd done nothing at this point besides those 2 triplexes, but they asked me to speak. I'm like, why are you asking me to speak? However, right then I thought, no, I'm just going to commit. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And then, of course, I'm as nervous as I can be over the next 2 weeks trying to figure out what I'm going to prepare to speak about. But that was the first time for me to speak in front of people about real estate, and that, it changed my whole perspective of being in front of the room. Right.
Yeah.
They asked me some good questions that challenged me and made me go back and learn a lot, but that was crucial. Be willing to be stretched, right? Be willing to take the step. And that's what I had to do.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I've been asked several times by people around, like, or I guess it's hard to conceptualize for people when they're first getting started, around the difference between your role as somebody who's investing in maybe single family or small multifamily properties to large, like a syndicator type role. Can you kind of explain the difference in your day-to-day as somebody who runs a capital company now and does syndications, from like what your role is? I mean, what do you do? Like, what's your main responsibility compared to maybe somebody who's doing, single family type rental properties?
Yeah. And it could be very similar depending on their scale, right? I mean, I have friends who have hundreds of single family homes. Well, they're doing a very different day-to-day task versus somebody who has 5. Right. It's a very different operation. And I would say that's more similar. Somebody that has hundreds is more similar to what I'm doing to some extent. However, me on a day-to-day basis it's managing a team, right? It's managing investors. It's talking, it's being the face of the company as well. Building those crucial relationships. I mean, we have had people that want to partner with us that could honestly partner with almost anybody, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. The doors, the Lord has opened for us to people that want to partner with us. And so, but it's those relationships that I've worked so hard to build over the last many years that, you start to see happen, but it takes a while, before that starts to happen. That's what I've been doing. I mean, and on a daily basis now, I mean, it's team meetings, it's interviews, obviously still podcast interviews. It's being on other interviews, just like yours. I'll do 3 or 4 of these today, alone. And then it's being a part of other groups, other meetings where I'm connecting with players that are ahead of me, right? And even people that are behind me as well, but like finding people who are ahead of me in other seasons of this path of business, right? But for me, managing all that on a weekly basis is what I'm doing now, but even growing that, we're still hiring, like I said. And so I hope in 6 months that I'm pulled back from many of those things, right? I want to still be that person that's driving the business, and I'm not so caught up in day-to-day meetings every day, right? If my schedule's open, it's crazy how your schedule can fill up, right? As I'm sure you can, agree with. But now, I'm not looking for that next deal, right? Sam's looking for those deals, and we're hiring other people to even help us generate leads, and or we have other people that are helping generate investors, and nurture investors and make sure they're taken care of, right? The best that we possibly can. I am no longer doing all of those things, but I'm still having to ensure that they get done and get done well. So it's a big transition from, hey, getting started, obviously you're doing everything, right? Versus, now we're going to build a team so we can do it better, and now we can scale, and now I'm going to manage those people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that comes as a byproduct of the stretching that you just talked about,
Right.
where you're, because that's not a comfortable thing, if you get good at something, to be able to just like step away from that thing and hand it off to somebody else. I think a lot of people struggle with that. So I think you're a testament to why that works. You can see that it's working, and it's allowed you to do much bigger things as a result. We're going into 2022 here, and I'm curious on your outlook here. I know no one has a crystal ball, but what are you guys doing to maybe shift, or maybe you're not shifting? Maybe you're doing the same thing you've always done, to prepare for the future, whatever it is. We've had a great run up over the last 12, 13 years now. The market just has gotten better and better. So do you think that's going to change here? And then how are you finding deals at a point where the market has run up for 13 years? I'm curious to hear that.
So future outlook and how we're finding deals.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately, are we buyers? Are we sellers? Yes and yes. We're both, and so we are. We're selling a project now, but we got an off market. We've had this project for 18 months, and we got an off market offer that will more than, or right at double our investors' investment,
Wow.
in 18 months. And so how can we turn that down? Right. And so we're, obviously we're selling, if there's things like that happen, and that's more and more common in today's market. I mean, those things are happening more than you think. But also we're buyers. But I think there's some basic things that you have to keep in mind, when you're buying, and it doesn't matter what part of the cycle that you're buying in, it's crucial to us anyway, that we have these things in mind, like long-term debt, right? Fixed rate debt. We want 10-year debt, on these projects. So we're not made to sell, right? And then at a fixed rate, if at all possible, right? We want preferably we want projects that are already cash flowing. We feel like there's just less risk in a project that's already occupied and already cash flowing. It may not be to its fullest potential, which we hope, right? There's a lot of value there, but we just feel like there's less risk if it's already operating in a project. We don't have to vacate 50 to 100% to remodel. There's a lot more risk around those. We are doing some development, but still a big focus is those value add deals that are already what we call stabilized from day one. So they're cash flowing. Investors receive a distribution within the first month, and every month thereafter. Those are the projects that we're after. But one other crucial thing for us is a reserve budget. And when I say reserve budget, I've interviewed thousands of people now, and it's like, I talk about this often, and people say, yeah, 1 to 2 months, in reserves. And then they may bring in some more from cash flow or something like that. That scares me personally. And I don't say that, of course, during an interview, but it does. And so, we prefer to have 6 to 9 months, in a reserve budget, just as an emergency fund, minimum. And I'll give you an example. There's actually the project that I just told you about that we're selling. We closed on that a week before they shut the country down last March. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we had $1.5 million in a reserve budget. And we have other operators that invest with us as well. And so they know this industry very well, and friends of mine, and they were like, Whitney, don't you think that's a little much, or a little, excessive? And I said, you know what, we're going to sleep a lot better. Our investors are going to sleep a lot better knowing we have this there. Just, when, it gets really bad and then something else on top of that, hey, we're going to be able to survive longer than most anyway. Right. And so there was some pushback there, but then, like I said, a week later, what happened? right? They shut the country down and everybody's like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? Are we going to be able to survive? Well, guess what? Nobody's saying a word about that reserve budget at that point.
Yeah.
Everybody's so thankful. But all that to say, do I expect a downturn next year? I don't know. Nobody knows for sure, right? But I do want to be as prepared as possible. We are still buyers. If we can find projects that will produce great returns for our investors, while doing those three things that I just told you, while also having, say, maybe a break-even occupancy in 50s, 60s, something like that, meaning, hey, even if we're 40%, have a 40% vacancy, we can still pay our bills, we still feel really good about it. Right? We still feel very good about those projects. And so we're still going to buy those. We are finding projects that are through relationships. Everything about our business is relationships. I mean, whether it's on the investor side, raising money, it's all about relationships, to finding properties for us. And for us, it's mostly all through broker connections. And so we've built relationships, right, with these brokers. We've done deals. They know we can close. They know we can raise the money. They know that we are easy to work with, and that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. And so guess what? They send us deals that they have. Even sellers that we've worked with now are sending us deals. We bought deals from them, and we've made the process as smooth as we can. Obviously things happen and you work through it, but you do what you say you're going to do, and you're as professional as possible. Hey, you know what? You're somebody they want to work with again. So when they have something to sell, they're reaching out and saying, hey, Whitney, we have this project. We know you all were great to work with. Would you all like to see this? And of course, we're going to say, well, yes, we'd love to see it, And so those are ways that we are still having deal flow. We're closing a project next week. And then I think we have 2 more under contract that will close probably in January, plus selling one in January, or actually selling one next week. We thought it was going to be January, and it's moved up. So there's still deals to be had. It's not maybe as easy as sometimes, but they're still out there, right? Yes, you're going to be selective. You got to have some criteria around that, of course. But there's still some out there to be had.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. I haven't heard people talk about that, because I've asked that question to a few multifamily investors. And a lot of people are kind of like, well, I just kind of hope that things just continue the way they've been going. And I'm like, wow, and I've noticed for myself, there's this book called The Big Leap. And I don't know if you've read it, but it's a great book. And he talks about this upper limit problem that people have. And it's almost like a thermostat that everyone has, that when you get to a certain amount of success, you're going to down throttle that thermostat because it just feels uncomfortable for you. And so, I've noticed that around raising money for myself, that it feels very uncomfortable once I get to a certain amount to raise capital above that amount. Cause I'm like, man, what if something happens? What if, and so, it's something I know I need to work on. And, I've asked other people that question. I've never felt like that's a good solution to it. But I think what you just explained is a great way to get beyond that point. Because I think a lot of people have that sticking point. If they have a conscience, they don't want to lose other people's money. So if you're, if you put that reserve in place and you're taking measures to be extra cautious with other people's money, I think it's going to allow you to maybe raise your own personal thermostat and do bigger deals and do more. So I like that answer.
I think it's another stretching point, right? Like we were talking about earlier, right? There's always somebody else that's doing it bigger and better than you. Mm-hmm. I don't care how good you are, right? How good you think you are, right? Yeah. You just need to know that, and you need to go find those people, right? So you can spend time with them and you can see how they're doing it, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to get past what you just talked about. And I was just at a family office event on Monday in Florida, and I mean, there's people there who are managing hundreds of millions of dollars for these families, right? And so that helped stretch my mind a little bit, right? I mean, I've had to do this so many times over the last few years. We're already in places that I never imagined being, as far as the size of our business and, a number of units or assets and however you want to measure that, we've so surpassed everything I imagined a few years ago, right? But even at this event, guess what? I got to meet and spend time with a billionaire. And just thinking about that, like I'm like a billionaire, like that is stretching for me in a massive way. Hundreds of millions is very stretching as well. But I'm just saying, like being around those people helps stretch you. You're like, okay, hey, what if all these people can do it again? I'll figure this out. I can do it as well. It helps you to stretch that thermostat like you're talking about.
Absolutely. You've got a top multifamily podcast. You've had over 1,200 episodes now, I believe. And that's a lot of experts that you've had on. So when you reflect back on the incredible talent that you've had on your show, are there certain themes that emerge around, what successful people are doing that others might not be, or, like big lessons that come up for you over and over again with people who are having a particular amount of success?
Yeah. I ask almost everyone a few of the same questions at the end. Every interview is very different, but I'll
Mhm.
typically ask about, a couple habits that you have that have helped you to be successful, or maybe one thing, the top thing that's helped you to achieve this level of success. I often ask that. And what I find though, that there's not this like cookie cutter way of having success, right? I mean, so many people even look for a mentor and expect that mentor to have like these three things you have to do and
Yeah.
you're going to make it. That's it. It just does not work that way. Right. And often even a mentor is that guy that or gal that's like encouraging you when you're down more than like having this amazing, thing to tell you. Right. Getting started, making it happen, be successful, I find is more. And again, before I even tell you what it is, I'll say I used to go to these conferences and people would talk about this, and that's when I would go to the back of the room and I'm like, give me a break, let's get to the meat and potatoes here, and ultimately it's your mindset, right? It is your mindset, and that's even why I start with the military story, the being in Iraq, the law enforcement, the federal agent. All those things are difficult, right? They're difficult, and they help shape my mindset, shape my willingness to or thought process of, hey, being willing to get up, to keep going. And even when you're tired, you know what, it can't be what just owns your day, right? You have to be willing to keep performing even when you're tired, or even when most people say, you know what, I'm just too tired to go to work today, or I'm just too tired to do that next interview. Guess what, it's just not an option.
Yeah.
Like, you got to keep doing it. And so it is so much that mindset. There's not a special formula. You have to be, and we've talked about it most of the show, you have to be willing to step out there, take a little risk. You have to be willing to stretch yourself, or it's just not going to happen, right? There's not a magic formula. The magic is changing your mindset and being willing to take a step forward, because it's the next step and the next step and the next step, that eventually you start seeing some traction. And some people do that by getting up early in the morning. I am one of those people. I would also say, if you want like a more concrete thing, more times than not, people are getting up early. I've had some people say, Whitney, you don't have to be an early riser to have success. And I would say, you're exactly right. You don't have to be an early riser, but more times than not, people that are up early are making things happen fast, early in the day, right?
Yeah.
And I hear that so many times, and I have a very similar story. When I started getting up early, having a very structured morning routine, hey, I started educating myself in ways that I never thought of before, started learning things, started doing things started to happen that it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have got up early and owned my day. Right. But all that's still mindset. You have to have the mindset to get out of the bed in the morning, right? When that alarm goes off. So yeah, you have to be willing to be strong mentally to go make it happen.
Got it. Yeah. So push yourself beyond your comfort zone and own your day. Get up early and own your day. That's a great tactical piece of advice there. Last question for you. You mentioned your goals. There's things that you're doing now that you never could have even imagined you'd be doing a couple of years ago. So I like to ask people how their goals have evolved over the years. So what did it look like when you were first getting started? What was your goal at that time? And now what's your goal?
Yeah. Many years ago, I'd say like 2009, 10, time frame, when we were first learning about rentals and some way to supplement our income, I think I would have been happy with like 10 rentals, a couple duplexes and a few single family. Like, I would have thought at that time, hey, this is pretty good. We have $25 to $50 to $100 per unit coming in. Like, this is great. Right. And I think that like, that's all I could see at that time. That's all I could envision for myself. But man, as we've stretched ourselves, as we have rubbed shoulders with all these other people, just like I was talking about, it helped me to say, hey, we can do so much more than that. That like, we can push ourselves so much further than that. And so those goals, obviously, went way to the, to the side, and we stretched those in a big way, because, you want to set realistic goals, but you want goals to be big enough that it does stretch you, right? For us, initially, my business partner and I think we had a goal of like 100 million, that year, right? That first year together. Our first project was 30 million, right? And pretty quickly we did a couple more, and so I think we may have got around like 90 something million that first year. I don't remember now exactly.
Oh,
But
failure.
do we hit our goal? Well, you could argue and say we didn't. However, man, we just still couldn't believe that we still even got that close, right? So did we not hit the goal? Well, not on paper, but man, we just blew really our personal goals out of the water, right? And so then shortly after, we're doing numerous of those deals, and now we're over 300 million. Well, by the end of next year, our goal by the end of 2020, I think we said 2023, when we wanted to be at $500 million. And I think we'll probably do that by the end of next year, and maybe faster than that. And so, as our team is growing, our ability is growing in massive ways. And so we're going to stretch those goals again. Personally, even for our foundation, I think we've partnered with 10 families. We'd like to partner with at least 30 next year, So there's personal goals, there's goals in business, even for our team. I want each team member to have a goal that's stretching them, right? I think Tony Robbins has what does he call it? Like 50-50 goals or something. If you look that up, I'm sure it will come up. But it's like, even that goal, if we'd have hit 50 million, I would have still said it's a successful year, right? I mean, that is a very successful year. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. That's great. That's a great way to look at it. Man, this is a great interview. I really appreciate all the insight here. If somebody is interested in investing with you or learning more about what you're investing in, what's the best way to reach out?
lifebridgecapital.com. Go to the contact page, or, there's a button right at the top, investor, sign up here. Please do that. We would love to help you any way we can. You can email me, Whitney at lifebridgecapital.com. Or you can call or text me, 540-585-4338. Nice.
Awesome. Yeah. It's great to have someone on who, I think shares very similar values, and, and I think that's what people are looking for when they want to place their money. So it's no wonder that you've had the success that you had. So I really appreciate the insight. And we'll have to do this again soon.
My pleasure, Kirby. Honored to be here.
Thanks.